take a poll as you came into the room. So hopefully everybody had an opportunity to do that. And the question was, what answer best describes imposter syndrome? So Angela, if you could share the results for that. Okay, so we're kind of in between answers 2 and 3, and actually both of those are correct. So Angela, thank you so much for sharing that. And if you want to pull up the slides, we'll go ahead and get into that also. Get into our slides. So who wants to share while we wait for the slides? Who wants to share why you answered the way you did? Does anybody want to share why you answered the way you answered?
If I may, Renita. So hi, everyone. My name is Sylvia. Hi. So when I think of an imposter, I always think of kind of a fraud. So you're kind of not maybe not being truthful. So when I was looking at the question, the answers in the survey, I just thought, it's just you're doubting who you are sometimes. And even though we have it within ourselves, we're like, are we fooling others like we're fooling ourselves? So that's why I answered.
Gotcha. Thank you so much, Sylvia. Yes, that is definitely a part of it. Does anybody else want to share why you answered the way you did?
I honestly was trying to figure out what I selected, but I forgot. But I definitely agree with Sylvia. I feel like sometimes I always put myself on the back end because I think I can't do something. And then I'm trying to allow someone else to do it. And whole time, like I have it inside of me. So it's just basically pushing it out of me and stop trying to allow people to place me at a lower standard.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Thank you so much, Bria, for sharing that. Yes, it's both of those answers are sort of the two that got the highest number of votes are both really correct answers. It's just one of them talks a little bit more about the workplace environment. So, Angela, if you could advance the slides a couple. So I think we already talked about what we're going to talk about. Right? So this is what we're going to talk about. And then, so this next slide, we'll get into sort of what imposter syndrome is. So it was coined by a couple of women psychologists in the 1970s. To describe high achieving women that, despite outstanding academic and professional accomplishments, persist in believing that they are really not bright and have fooled anyone who thinks otherwise. So the article was criticizing that original concept of imposter syndrome because what they really did is pathologize the universal feelings of discomfort, second guessing, and mild anxiety that happens, especially when we're in a new workplace. A lot of us have what I call what is commonly referred to in the coaching community, even in the psychology community, as an inner critic. Now, I call that inner critic your killer critic because it often kills your dreams, whatever it is that pops up as the things that you think that you should be doing. And it often comes from an external source. It comes from maybe an authority figure who said that, you can't be, you shouldn't do, you won't do something that you wanted to do. And what happens is we internalize those feelings. And I think that's what really is happening here with imposter syndrome. So there's really two components that contribute to that feeling. So there's the socialization that we get, as especially as women, that tells us what we can't and cannot do, and it often doesn't see us as leaders. But then there's a second component, and that is the environment. And as we talked about the last time we spoke back that last fall, we talked about how competitive, how debilitating some of these toxic male environments can be, because number one, they don't see women as leaders, right? And then the other piece to that is when we do try to emulate the behavior that we see in the space, then we're called aggressive. And we talked a little bit last time about even the B word, right? So the imposter syndrome concept puts the blame on the first component, the individual, without accounting for the second component, which is the historical and cultural context that contribute to why, imposter syndrome especially manifests in women. So again, we talked about fixing the workplaces last fall, but until that happens, until women are represented in leadership positions that are equal to our population in the workplace or our population in the world, we're going to focus on how we can stay and then thrive in these environments. And one of those things is by being our authentic self. So Angela, if you would advance the slides, please. Okay, so let's talk a little bit about confidence. So we're going to talk about confident, being competitive, and being connected. And so this first piece is the confidence. So there has been a ton of articles about women's leadership during the pandemics. And you can stop sharing for a minute, Angela, if you would. There's been a ton of articles because I want people to get in here and get engaged with what we're talking about. So I've posted a couple in my Leadership Unlocked private Facebook group. I've seen several on LinkedIn. What, if you've read some of the articles that talk about women's leadership during the pandemic, what has been the general conclusion? I know some of you've read some of them.
They did a good job.
They did a good job. Women lead better. Yes, that's been a general conclusion. Anybody else want to come off the mic and answer? Are you all being shy today?
I'm going to answer, even though I'm driving.
Okay.
I think what stood out to me is that women tend to be more empathetic. So in a time that the world is hurting, we need empathetic leaders, not just in times of hurt, but like that empathy is really powerful.
Absolutely. We need time. We need empathy at all times. Okay. Anybody else want to, now that Shane has broken the ice, anybody else want to jump in and share? Okay, so let me just share a little bit. A lot of the articles that were published cite the research that was conducted by Jack Zinger and Joseph Folkman, which shows that women in leadership positions are perceived as being every bit as effective as men. In fact, women were thought to be more effective in 84% of the competencies most frequently measured. So we have another poll. So Angela, if you could launch the poll, we're going to give you an opportunity to determine, to guess or to know which of the competencies were women felt to be more effective in. Oh, no, actually, that's not the question. The question is men scored higher in which category? So women outscored men in 17 of the 19. So that would be very long. Which are the two where men scored higher? That's the question. I forgot what I had written, Angela. I'll give you a minute to answer that. Looks like people are, yeah, okay. Okay, I think probably everybody that could respond that wasn't driving has responded. So Angela, you can end it and launch it. Okay, so let's look at the responses here. So we think that men scored higher in developing strategic perspective, driving for results, technical or professional expertise, and takes initiative was the #1 response. So everybody got a picture of that. You can stop sharing, Angela. Thank you all so much for participating in the poll. So guess what? Men were rated better as being better in two capabilities, as I said, that was developed strategic perspective and technical or professional expertise. So actually women scored better than men when it comes to takes initiative, right? So we're not slouches when it comes to that. And oh, by the way, we're going to share this article. It'll be one of the things that we share as we go go after this is done. So yeah, but here's the thing: when we are asked to assess ourselves, and the same article talks about this, we're not as generous toward ourselves as other people are toward us. We have lower scores than men on those factors that measure confidence. Especially when we're younger. Now that starts to change when we, get around 40, and then when the confidence ratings kind of merge, and then by the time we're 60, we're like, hey, we got it going on, right? And that happens for a lot of reasons, and we won't get into that here. And then we also start to get some ageism. But as I say to anybody that will listen, y'all gonna get all of this, so whether you want it or not. So, okay, but here's some of the things that we can do to make sure that we are being as confident as we possibly can when we show up in these spaces. So what is it that you know, right? So being confident in what you know from a holistic perspective. Physically, I come from a military background.
What is it?
Oh no, we okay? I used to hear this comment about that person looks like a leader. Well, what that normally meant that they were tall and they looked strong. Well, what about 5'3.5" me, right? So do I also look like a leader? So especially in this information and automation age, the physical component is just really less important. It's just not as important. Who you are and what you're doing to develop yourself spiritually, emotionally, and mentally. Those are the things that are most important when it comes to who you are. What do you bring to the space? Here's the thing: most of us have experience being in a space where we may be the only woman. That happens quite frequently, especially as we go up to the leadership ladder. But that very seldom is an experience that men have. So guess what? They're probably less comfortable than you are. And you also bring your perspective that you have as a woman and the experience that you have. I did an emerging leader program with a local company, and one of the women shared during this summer, as we were doing a lot of virtual learning, that she sat in on a development process. I think she was the only woman, and they were all gung-ho about this product that they were about to put out, and everybody was like, yeah, this is a great product, and it really was trying to solve a problem that's been brought about by the pandemic. And she said, hey, wait a minute, as a woman, this is how I use this. And it was completely contrary to what the men in the room were thinking and say it. And it probably saved so much money when it comes to development. I mean, how many products have we seen that got all the way to on the shelf, and there was some racist component to it, there was some other thing that was offensive to people. So she's probably saved the company money by not allowing that to happen. But so often we're not at those seats, we're not at the table, our perspective is not listened to. And so the other piece that we bring to the table is a self-awareness, because women have probably done the self-development. And because we know we will be seen in a much more critical way, we are usually better prepared, sometimes even over prepared. That was one of the criticisms of our of Hillary Clinton as a presidential candidate, that she was over prepared, I remember. But here's the thing: we know what we're going to encounter. And what's wrong with being prepared? Okay, that's one of the problems that one of the articles I'm going to share with you talks about, is that sometimes we have men in those positions who aren't as prepared, who come to the table with a lot of confidence but not a lot of competence, right? So there's a difference between confidence and competence. And then the other piece is understanding your superpowers. So your strengths, your values, again, as I talked about, your perspective, those things that we call soft skills that are really just leadership skills. You already talked to that. Shayna talked to the fact that empathy is one of those skills that people value, especially in a time of crisis. But when you think about what people value, in the workspace, you very seldom hear people talk about, well, this, leader, got us, we had this bottom line, the return on investment was this, that, and other. What we really hear when we talk about leadership is the people that saw us, that made us feel valued in that workspace. And women have that capability in spades. And it's not just in a crisis, we have it all the time. So we could go to the next slide. So one of the things that we've got to be willing to do is to be competitive in these environments, right? So the competitive energy, the behavior, the culture in a male-led work environment may be foreign to you if you didn't grow up with brothers, or if you've not been in that environment. Men have a tendency to get into that kind of rough and tumble. How many times have I heard a woman say, it's like, we saw this, or I've experienced myself, you see a couple of men going at it, and then they're going out to have a drink later, right? Because it's just a part of the game. And then the motivation for conversation for a lot of men is competition. It's kind of a one-upmanship. We talked about that again a little bit in the fall. That's why you get, some of the interruption. It's about how many times did I talk, right? And we just gotta stop. We can't stop talking when men try to interrupt us, or when other people try to interrupt us. And then sometimes in these environments, there's an attempt to get the women to compete against each other. So the picture that you see on the slide is of Carrie Champion and Jamel Hill, and it's from an episode of the Red Table Talk. And what they talked about is they were both news anchors at ESPN. And what the people in that environment tried to do is to pit them one against the other. The people in one camp were saying, this about the other person, in the other camp, they were saying this about so it's just this back and forth that they were getting from the environment. And so finally, Jamel said, you know what, let me go have a conversation with her. And she basically said, you're going to be my friend. Okay, we're not going to listen to all of this BS that we're getting from this competitive environment. So, and they are now doing a show together, right? Carrie and Jamel won't stick to sports. And so that's just a great story, I think, of how we can not allow the environment to change who we are. But I'm curious, how have you competed in a competitive environment? So if we could take the slides off for a second and see if there's anybody that wants to kind of share their experience of competing in a very competitive male environment, that would be amazing.
Okay, I can go.
Thank you, Bria.
Okay, so I work at a high school, and I just got a new position, and it's quite funny because the position that I'm in is usually for males, and ever since I got the position, everyone in the building just like, how is it? And I think they're just trying to spook me and telling them something like, oh, this is going bad, so they can go run off and tell my boss she said this, and every time I'm just giving the most positive answer, I'm just taking it day by day. Okay. But I've noticed a lot of people just keep asking me just okay, so do you know what you're doing? Or because they think I'm so young, and I work with a lot of older people, and it's well, do you actually know what you're doing? And that question always makes me laugh, because I'm if I didn't, I wouldn't be in this position. You can't tell me what, so I'm learning to be confident in what I say, and just dealing with the competition. It's a lot, man. It can be troubling sometimes, but I feel I'm getting there.
That is so awesome. Thank you so much, Bria, for sharing, because, you are really just, giving an example of what I just said, is that you can't allow these external forces to, tell you something that's not true about yourself, right?
Yes.
Absolutely. Oh, that's awesome. Thank you so much for sharing. I appreciate that. Anybody else want to share?
I will go. So I have learned over the years that I'm an introvert, and I've also learned that I have a very I'm a very competitive person, but it's not traditional competition. So I set goals and then I always try to best those goals. I guess most people would say that's a perfectionistic tendency, but I feel like I compete against myself. So when other people set standards that I'm supposed to, challenge or adhere to, it often makes me angry. I feel sort of backed up and backed into a corner, and that makes me come out fighting, unfortunately. So I have been labeled, the angry Black woman and all of these things because I just have that philosophy of don't start none, won't be none. And so as long as I'm in my little world and doing what I want to do, I'm good. And I don't, I'm a high achiever. I do what I need to do. But the moment you start imposing your standards, then we have a problem. And so as I have grown and matured, I have had to learn how to kind of pull back the tiger that comes out when people push those issues. But I'm very much like, we can all be copacetic, we can all get along, but the moment I start feeling like you're encroaching up on my territory, then I come out, and then it's then I have to list all my credentials, then I have to list all of my achievements, and then I have to, gently push, maybe not always gently, but push you back to your side of the table. So that's kind of how over time I've learned to deal with those things. But in my early career, as I started as an engineer, and I was often one of the only Blacks, not always one of the only females, because I was in chemical engineering. There were a lot of women. But anyway, there was a lot of competition there. And I just didn't understand in my 20s. I didn't even understand what that was about. And it didn't make sense to me. So I was always often seen as quiet and passive. And then it grew to kind of coming out a little more aggressive and maybe adapting some of those.
Yeah, and so we're going to talk about that. Thank you so much for sharing, Stephanie. And the engineering world, I think the electrical piece may sometimes be a little bit more male dominated, but there are a lot of them. I have one of my sisters is an engineer. And so, and I love what you said about that internal competition, that internal motivation, because really competition is a motivating factor. Some people are motivated by external factors. A lot of people are motivated by internal factors. And it sounds like you are one of those people that are internally motivated. You are your own competition, right? Yeah. So you're going to set the standards and try to beat the goals that, you have for yourself. The emotional intelligence that we gain as we get older, can help us not be rattled by what other people bring to us. Right? Nobody gets to tell you who you are, but you. Nobody gets to define you, but you. But that's sometimes something we learn as we get older. And I'm trying to just make sure the 20-year-olds know that, right? That's my goal. Make sure you know that when you're 20. So that merge in confidence happens a little bit earlier. Right?
Yes.
It's not 40 when we feel that, equally confident. It happens at 25. It happens at Bria's age. Bria, you look about 12. So.
I know, and I'm actually 25.
Okay, see, there you go. So Bria's got it. She's figured it out. She's like, hey.
So, yes.
Thank you all so much for sharing. Anybody else want to share before we move on?
Just a follow-up from that, Renita, too, because we've talked about this, how especially I'm now in my 30s, but going through the 20s and figuring out and getting often beat down in work, but also there's a lot of self-work to do. There is a lot of personal growth and development, but then there's also this sometimes feels like adversarial, things that are pushed upon you, and then they kind of combine with your own issues, and then it's this explosion at times. So what would you say to especially those that are growing in their careers of doing the work on you, but then also figuring out what are the external issues that I have to stand up for myself, so, and just navigating.
We're going to talk about a couple of ways to do that, but to the self-development, which is something women usually do a little bit more of. Because we're in this environment, we're normally the ones reading the self-help books, right? So we're kind of usually a little bit more aware, being aware of, all those things that I talked about, your values, your strengths, your triggers. What are the things that get you going? Just that self-awareness is such a strategic advantage, because we know, and then when we know, we can we can have some mastery over it, right? So that's the emotional intelligence piece that we usually have a little bit more. So what the researchers have shown now for the last 20-30 years, ever since Daniel Goleman published Emotional Intelligence, it's not the IQ that's a primary predictor of successful leadership, it's the EQ. So that's the self-management. That's the being able to know about yourself and manage yourself. And then, as Shana talked about, how we interact with others. So that empathy and how we see others and how we relate to them. So there's two components of the emotional intelligence piece. Women usually have that a little bit better because we're socialized. We're socialized that way. That's a whole nother conversation too. We're allowed to have our emotions. We're allowed to communicate our emotions in ways that men are not socialized. And this is kind of, one of the problems is as we see, as they get into these environments and they don't know how to respond, or if they do respond even with a little bit of emotional awareness, we're like, oh, they get a whole lot of credit for that, right? So we're expected to be that way. So when we're that way, it's not as big of a deal. So thank you all so much for sharing. I would just say do understand the energy in these competitive environments. Do engage to the extent that you feel comfortable doing so. In the military, I would call them ranger games, and sometimes I just didn't play. It's like, no, I'm not going to play today, so not going to play the reindeer games. And then, but when you encounter it, don't get offended by it, right? And then don't get sucked into the false narrative about other women, because that happens too. Stephanie talked about, encountering some women and there was a competition. They may have been impacted by this environment, because who we are at our core, we're nurturers, we're collaborators, we're about community. But sometimes in these environments, we try to fit in and we become something other than, what we really are. Don't, be like Jamel and Carrie. Don't let the environment tell you about the other person. Get to know that person yourself. I was having a conversation with a young lady that I mentor, and she, expressed that she had encountered a woman who actually outranked her. And the woman, she had reached out, and I said, just keep reaching out. And as it turned out, the woman was feeling a little overwhelmed in this new job. And even though she was a higher rank, felt like she had nothing to offer to the person that I was mentoring. So, it could be some internal stuff that's going on, but, reach out. We can't be afraid to reach out to each other and provide that space, which is what I want to talk about in the next slide. And that's if you could share the next slide, Angela, which is about just being connected. So, So all kinds of ways to be connected, your spiritual practice, whatever that may be, when you are in these environments and you're going through it, it really helps to have a faith to fall back on. But we can also cultivate connections with mentors that can show you the ropes. You can also cultivate connections with your peers and allies. I always tell people to reach out to those peers and ask for the support in the spaces that you're going to be in. So if you're in this environment working again with other men, or maybe just a few women, find that person who maybe gave you some positive reinforcement and let them know, hey, I need you to be my ally when I'm in a space and that I'm not being listened to, perhaps, or somebody's talking over, say, I want to hear what Renita has to say. I want to know, what she is bringing to the table. So be sure that you find those mentors and peers in the workspace. And then, you can find other support. So I mentioned Mox.E Women. This is a picture of the Mox.E Women gathering in the Mox.E co-working space back in January. Again, the Mox.E Women is a support group for Christian women and leaders, entrepreneurs and leaders. And, you know, we support each other. We give each other an opportunity, a safe space to share the things that we might be going through. But we don't just, you know, it's not just, you know, what's the tea? It's not just, you know, going through problems. It's offering some professional, personal, and spiritual development. So we do that, and we provide that support to each other. We meet monthly. I think Angela will probably share that information with you when she sends out the information after this is over. So, and then the last thing I want to talk about is that ability to take up space, right? So we are already more prepared. You know, Angela talked about the self-development. Yes, you should be doing the self-development. You should be, you know, reading books. You should be taking part in conferences. That's just what leaders do. One of my sayings is leaders are learners. So we should always be striving to learn. You should try to cultivate a growth mindset. A growth mindset basically means there's always more to know. There's always more to learn. There's always ways to improve. I'm a leadership coach. I believe that leaders can always be better in their leadership. If I didn't believe in growth and learning and all that, I wouldn't be doing what I'm doing. And so it's important to cultivate. And I think Sylvia, you talked about, you know, growth mindset. I saw a video that you did. Sylvia talked about growth mindset, I think last week. So yeah, you want to cultivate that growth mindset. But then when you're in the spaces that you're in, understand that there is a reason you're in the position, in the room, or at the table. And then take every opportunity to speak up, right? If you're in the room or at the table, you're there for a reason. Speak up. If you're at the table, spread out. Right? We talked about this before. Take up as much space as the person that's leading. Just, you know, put your stuff here. You got your notepad, you got your computer, you got your coffee cup. Just take up space. And then the other thing is getting used to talking about yourself. And so I don't know that you can stop sharing. Okay. We're going to do an exercise because we have time. We're going to take about 10 minutes till to do an exercise. We tried to do this before. We ran out of time. But so one of the things that we don't do very well, I think, as women, and I know I've been in this space, is talking about ourselves. So I want you to practice talking about yourself, and we're going to actually give you time to do that. So you're each going to be randomly assigned to a breakout room with someone else that you probably don't know. You're going to decide who goes first, and then the first person will spend 2 minutes talking about themselves while the other person listens. We'll get a message to switch, and then the other person will spend 2 minutes talking about herself, and then you'll get a notification about 1 minute before the breakout ends, and you're going to spend that time reaffirming each other. And then we'll come back here at about 10 till. I think that will give us enough time to do everything that we have to do, Angela. So are we ready to do that? Okay. To the breakout rooms.
Go ahead and join your room. Hi, Lisa. No worries, Lisa. If are you on a phone call? Oh, you're on mute.
I say, I'm so sorry. I'm trying to take care of a client's reservation.
Oh, no, that's
travel.
fine.
I have a travel
You can
agency.
talk. That's not a problem. So
I thought I hit no to the breakout room because I'm trying to rebook these folks for 2022 now for a cruise. So I apologize for not really engaging. I'm listening, but.
Oh, you know what? Somebody moved. Sorry, I'm looking at the rooms to make sure. Let me move her. There we go.
Tell Renita I am listening, but kind of
Renita's
in and out, kind of double duty to,
okay.
So I logged in.
Hey, Renita, what's up?
I was gonna say while I'm on hold. Was there something I was supposed to be answering?
Sorry, do you see where the breakout rooms are? Can you join the room?
Let's see. Switch. Oh.
Yeah.
Oh.
Okay, I'm glad I refreshed.
Yeah, because I actually went up there and I wanted to get the voice recorded and I just got caught and just until Hey, Renita, you're muted.
Did you just join the room or you brought me up? LaShandra doesn't seem to be here, so.
Okay, no problem. There we go. Yeah, I jumped in because I was like, let me go into Renita's room.
Yeah.
But it looks like, yeah.
Yeah, I'm not sure.
For the most part, there's 2 people in every room.
Okay, good. Yay.
2 or 3. So anyway.
Okay.
So far, so good.
So far, so good. Yeah.
Okay.
Lots of engagement. I'm enjoying the engagement. I'm seeing some head nodding. So that's all. That's what I like to watch, so I can see how people are responding.
Right. I'm like, should I go in and creep in on some of these rooms or just give a message?
You want to just give them the close the rooms at 49.
Yeah, I'll give them a broadcast a message and a second for 1 minute left.
Yeah. Okay. Well, if you close the rooms, it'll give them 60 seconds.
That's true. Okay. Yeah, that's the thing is sometimes, not everybody is like, can talk, they might just have it on the background. So keep that in mind for the future. Okay, I'm going to leave the room.
Okay, and then what we can do is, hey, Lisa, I saw your beautiful face.
I'm high because I'm on a reservation line trying to get some clients taken care of. So that's why I've had my picture up.
I love that background. I love your Delta picture. Is that your home?
No, this is a virtual background.
Yeah.
I love it. Oh my goodness, I love it with the Hello, throw them up. Thanks so much for joining. Okay, and we can go ahead and I'll make some comments and we can share that last slide, Angela, before we open it up. So welcome back. Okay, so go to the last slide. There you go. We're going to have a little time to do a little Q&A, and I will be curious to see if everybody was able to talk for the full time, right? But anyway, I just kind of wanted to share my information. I am here in all these spaces. I'm on Facebook. I have a Facebook group, which is Leadership Unlocked. I have Instagram, LinkedIn. I'm on Clubhouse. I do a thing, Just Breathe, on Sundays at 4 p.m. Central Standard Time. And then I will also be having an event in May, right before Mother's Day, called Unblock Your Barriers. So please look for that. If you're interested in knowing more about that, please share your email in the chat, and I will be sure to put you on my email list and share that information. But now we're going to go to some Q&A, and I think Angela is going to ask some questions or see if you have any questions.
Yeah, if anyone has any questions, you can put it in the chat, or we can, we'll open it up. But that was great, Renita. Something that you touched on at the beginning was how, imposter syndrome is kind of very much about the people who have been impostercized. It's kind of like the term battered woman, right? Like, why is it called a, like she was battered too. So it's kind of like naming someone as a result of kind of an experience or a system that they've been put under. So does anyone have any questions you want to bring up, or like an experience that, yeah, Shannon.
Hi, everybody. Thank you so much, Renita, and thank you, Angela, for such a great session. My question is about coaching team members through imposter syndrome or imposter phenomenon, whichever you want to call it. I've seen it as a theme with the young women on my team throughout my whole career since I started managing folks. And so what are your recommendations for managers who are helping to coach their team members through this? And specifically with the lens of these team members are naming it, like they understand, they know. So would love your thoughts.
Yeah, I mean, again, it goes back to what I shared about knowing who you are and being confident in that. So whatever it is that you're bringing to the table. And then the other piece is just this recognition that what you're bringing to the table as a woman is valuable. Right? So we use this term called soft skills. It's not soft skills, it's leader skills. It's leadership skills. What we bring to the table is leadership skills. And again, it's this attempt to diminish and demean what it is that we're bringing to the table by men who sometimes feel threatened or just don't understand that we can be leaders too, because they haven't been socialized that way. And so it's the owning who you are and being comfortable in that, in all of that, in all of who you are, understanding that you do have a voice and your voice is valuable, and you would not be in the position, you're not being given a position. You are in the position because you've earned it, because of your excellence, because of your expertise, because of your experience. Okay. And I have never encountered a woman who was underprepared to be in any space, especially in a male space, right? We are normally over prepared. We come into the space knowing what we know, and knowing that we know it. But sometimes we are afraid to, speak that. And so it's just, continue to encourage, to continue to help them understand what it is they know. And just to give them opportunities to speak out, give them, and then encourage them when they do, help them to, get that peer-to-peer interaction. You're being a great mentor by helping them, and again, giving them opportunities and encouraging them when they do well, and letting them do it. Let them fail also, it's okay. That's how we learn. Sometimes, the way we learn is doing it and not doing it well, and then getting an opportunity to do it again. So I hope that answers your question.
I think to tag on to that, Renita, too, this is where Mox.E Women helped me so much, even 5 or 6 years ago, was being in a setting where I felt seen and I realized I wasn't alone. Like that to me was very healing, and it helped me also kind of see other people who had gone through the whole career speak into my life. So maybe it's finding or like creating a group like that where people could just show up and share once a month or once a quarter. Because to me, especially, I'm still young in my career, but like just starting, that was really helpful to know that my experience, because I always blamed myself, like there's something wrong with me. And then eventually I realized like, oh no, this is like a thing. So.
Mm-hmm. You know, and to your point, Angela, sometimes when you're the only one, you do internalize it, but having, you know, somebody else there who kind of sees things, or having another woman often, you know, validates what you're experiencing. So it's like, oh yeah, you know, that did happen. That was happening, right? So you're not feeling, or, you know, if you don't have that at the job, that's where a support group comes in, right? And so Angela mentioned Mox.E, I mentioned Mox.E. You don't have to join Mox.E, but you know, you can. But we're gonna be doing some exciting things, but you know, there are other ways to get that support that you may need from people who believe in you and are willing to hear and see what you have to say, hear you and see you, because that's what we all crave. Great question.
Thank you.
Who had, did anybody have trouble talking about themselves for the entire time? Bria's like, no.
No, actually, it's actually pretty cool just getting to know new people, and not to be afraid to actually just talk to people. Like, it's okay. You know, I sometimes stutter. So just learning that just be confident in the way that I speak and just accept it.
All of that. Absolutely. Yes. Awesome. Do anybody else have questions or comments?
I just want to echo, this is Candace. I just want to echo what Bria said about having the opportunity to just connect with others, because when we share our stories and we can hear about, you know, what others have gone through, you know, we can really connect and relate in that way. And we find ourselves, I mean, I've read the article, and I do believe that our workspaces and different environments we're in exacerbate, you know, our feelings about, you know, our doubts about ourselves, right? Mm-hmm. So the article talked about positive motivation, right? Or how did it put it? You know, how do you switch it in a way where, you know, there may be doubts, right? But how do you reinforce it in a way where even if your environment doesn't support it in a way, how are you filling your own tank? You know, and I think that I just want to thank you all for hosting this. And this has been great, Renita, because it creates a space for us to hear from one another and fill our tanks so that we can reinforce, you know, or really understand, not even understand. I mean, we already believe that we are enough, right? We're supposed to be here. We're supposed to be in this room. But if anyone tells us differently, we hear other people's stories and we're just kind of like, yep, we've experienced it. We have experienced that, but it doesn't discredit and take away from what we know about ourselves and what we own, and we should all be owning our spaces. So thank you all so much for that.
Absolutely. And we have to do that for ourselves. We have to do that for ourselves, right? But we can encourage in others in that filling up of their tanks, right? By reminding them of how special they are. So each of you is very special. I appreciate you being here. I know Angela has a hard stop in a minute.
No, we're okay. We're okay, Renita. No, this has been great. I think again, you know, we could record a podcast, but it doesn't bring this sense of like, again, being live together and being seen and being validated. And so I'm really grateful for all those who are sick of Zoom calls that you guys joined and participated and learned from Renita. And from each other. And so and we want to continue conversations like these. Like we mentioned, we do have our Mox.E Women group, but one thing we're trying to really pull off this year is a little Mox.E Women conference. And so it's going to be mostly virtual, but there'll be a live component through our space for like kind of like VIP people. So if you are you know, interested in volunteering and helping us plan this, you're kind of like putting this out there. I'm putting something in the chat, but I will also share it with an email follow-up. we're really hoping that this is a time to after a very difficult season to come together and just encourage each other. And Renita, what's the theme again for the event?
Emerge.
Emerge.
So we're going to do emerge from whatever we've been going through. Right?
Absolutely. Empower, emerge, all those things. And then also I put in a link about, this is a program that I'm participating in, and Chicago Innovation does this, I think, every 6 months, but it's a women's co-op mentoring group. And I didn't think I would find as much value out of it as I have. So that's a really great one, that they connect C-level executives with women coming up in their careers. So highly suggest that at one point we might launch our own mentoring program for women. We'll see what we have capacity to do.
Let's talk about it. We need you all to join us, right? We need somebody to lead that program.
Right, yeah, there we go. And I think that's it. So again, I'll send this recording out on a follow-up email, but thank you, Renita, as always. You're the rock star. And we want to follow in footsteps that you've already laid. And also you have so much more that you're accomplishing now too. So
that's why y'all gonna get all of this.
Yeah. Go out and own your space and show up and be present.
Be amazing.
Be here. All right.
Awesome.
Thank you guys so much for this.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you.
I forgot to ask, do you mind putting the spiritual, it's like a group that you have